"Where are you, you incompetent mess? The 20 people I invited have already arrived, and the food isn't ready." Kate's scream cut through the living room like a crack of thunder on Christmas Eve. 20 faces turned toward me at the exact same moment. 20 pairs of eyes locked on Margaret Sullivan, a 69-year-old woman holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres with trembling hands, standing in the entryway of her own living room, in her own house, being humiliated by her own daughter in front of strangers she barely knew. My daughter pointed her index finger at me, her face twisted by a rage that seemed to feed on every passing second. Her voice bounced off the walls of the house I had built brick by brick alongside my late husband James. That house where I raised her. That house where I gave her everything I never had. Conversations cut off instantly. Wine glasses remained suspended in midair. Holiday smiles froze into awkward grimaces. No one knew where to look. Some shifted their gaze toward the decorated tree. Others pretended to check their phones. A woman coughed nervously. But everyone had heard. Everyone had been a witness. Incompetent mess. Those words hung in the air, like toxic smoke. I felt each one stab into my chest, into my dignity, into the 69 years of life I had carried with pride until that moment. My legs shook. Tears began to burn my eyes, but I held them back. I was not going to cry. Not in front of all of them. I was not going to give Kate that satisfaction. Richard, my son-in-law, stood next to her with his arms crossed and that smirk of satisfaction that always turned my stomach, as if he were enjoying the show, as if my humiliation were the best Christmas gift he could receive. "Mom, if you can't handle something as simple as preparing a dinner, you should say so before ruining the night for everyone." Kate's voice was now cold, calculated, perfectly modulated to sound reasonable in front of the guests. But I knew that tone. It was the one she used when she wanted to sink you without anyone else noticing. It was the one she perfected in her years as a lawyer, that tone that made you feel guilty of crimes you never committed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind everyone in that room full of strangers that I had been cooking since 5 in the morning, that I had been on my feet for 14 hours, with my arthritic knees protesting every step, that I had prepared appetizers, the main course, side dishes, desserts, everything alone, everything with my own tired hands, while she fixed her hair and put on that red dress that probably cost more than $500. I wanted to ask her in front of everyone if she remembered who paid for every semester of college, who sold her wedding jewelry to buy her law books, who worked double shifts cleaning offices so she could have the best education possible. But I said nothing. I lowered my gaze as I had learned to do over these last 3 years. I swallowed the knot forming in my throat. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. And I walked toward the kitchen while I listened to Kate resume her role as the perfect hostess. "Excuse my mother. You know how elderly people are. Sometimes they get confused with quantities and time. It is part of the age." Awkward laughter. Murmurs of understanding. Someone said something about their own mother and memory problems. The conversation continued as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been torn to pieces in front of 20 strangers on Christmas Eve. In the kitchen, I leaned the tray on the counter and closed my eyes. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The heat from the oven still filled the space, mixing with the smell of the turkey that had been marinating since the night before. Around me were piles of dirty dishes, pots to wash, remnants of ingredients scattered everywhere, the result of a whole day of work that Kate had just reduced to nothing. How did I get here? That question pounded in my head over and over again while I tried to catch my breath. How did I allow my own daughter to turn me into this, into a shadow inside my own home, into an unpaid and disrespected employee, into a nuisance that had to be apologized for in front of guests? 3 years ago, everything was different. Kate arrived at my door with Richard and their 2 small children, Emma, who was 5, and Liam, who was 3. "Mom, we need to stay with you just for a few months. Just while we find something bigger. You know how the housing market is. Rents are impossible. We are barely going to start saving for the down payment on a house of our own." And I, like the fool I was, opened the doors wide. "Of course, honey. This will always be your home. Stay as long as you need. We are going to be fine. We are family." How blind I was. The months turned into a year. The year turned into 2, and then into 3. And somewhere along the way, without me being able to pinpoint exactly when it happened, I stopped being the mother and became the maid. Kate worked late at her law firm, so I prepared dinner. Richard traveled constantly for business, so I took care of the grandkids. The house was big, so I cleaned every corner. They had busy and important lives, meetings, clients, social commitments, so I took care of everything else. The laundry, the groceries, the dishes, the bathrooms, the yard, everything. And every time my exhaustion showed, every time I tried to say I needed a break, Kate had a perfectly rehearsed answer. "Oh, Mom, I'm only asking for a small favor." "Mom, I thought you liked spending time with your grandkids." "Mom, it's not a big deal. It's just a little help." "Mom, at your age, it's not like you have much else to do anyway." And I nodded. Because that was how I had been taught. Because a mother always helps. Because family comes first. Because my own needs could wait. They could always wait. I opened my eyes and looked around the kitchen. The clock showed 9 at night. I had been working 16 hours non-stop. My feet hurt so much I could barely stand. My back screamed with every movement. But I still had to serve the main course, clean the second round of dishes, make the coffee, cut the dessert. I heard laughter from the living room. Kate's voice dominated the conversation, telling some anecdote from the firm where she worked, probably exaggerating her achievements as she always did. The guests laughed at the right moments. They asked admiring questions at the precise moments. No one asked about me. No one came to see if I needed help. Incompetent mess. Those words kept bouncing around in my head. I wondered if any of those 20 guests knew the truth. If they knew that I had been awake since before dawn. If they knew that I had prepared everything they were eating with my own hands. If they even cared. Probably not. To them, I was just Kate's elderly mother, the old lady who lived in the house, part of the furniture. As invisible as the wallpaper, I took a rag and began to wipe the counter mechanically. My hands moved out of pure habit, while my mind wandered to places I preferred not to visit. I remembered when Kate was little, when she hugged me before sleeping and told me I was the best mom in the world, when she made me drawings at school and pasted them proudly on the refrigerator, when she cried in my arms after a nightmare and I rocked her until she went back to sleep. At what moment did that girl turn into this woman? At what moment did love transform into contempt? The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. Kate entered the kitchen with her phone in her hand. She didn't even look me in the eye. The turkey should already be on the table. People are waiting. "I don't know what you are doing standing here doing nothing." Doing nothing. I looked at the mountains of dirty dishes, the oven still hot, my wrinkled hands stained with grease. Doing nothing. "I'm coming," I whispered. Kate left the kitchen without adding anything else. No thank you. No apology for yelling at me in front of 20 people. Nothing. Just the click of her heels moving away down the hallway. I took the turkey out of the oven. It weighed almost 20 pounds, and my arms protested as I lifted it. I placed it on the serving platter I had inherited from my mother, that silver platter that survived 3 generations and that Kate now used for her parties as if it had always been hers. While I garnished the turkey with the sides, I heard Richard's voice from the living room. He was talking about investments, about real estate, about the growth of the housing market. His voice had that tone of fake authority that annoyed me so much, as if he knew more than everyone else about any topic. In fact, we just closed an excellent deal, a property in a prime area. We are still looking at the final details, but it's going to be a brilliant investment. I don't know why, but those words sent a chill down my spine. Something in his tone, something in the way Kate laughed afterward, that laugh I knew too well. I shook my head. I was being paranoid. Exhaustion was playing tricks on me. I carried the platter and walked toward the dining room. 20 faces lit up upon seeing the golden and perfectly cooked turkey. There was applause. There were exclamations of admiration. Someone said it looked delicious. Another commented on how well presented it was. Kate smiled as if she had done all the work. "Mom helped a little with the preparation," she said with that fake humility she perfected for court hearings. "But you know, I supervised every detail to ensure it was perfect, helped a little, supervised every detail." I placed the platter in the center of the table, and returned to the kitchen without saying a word. No one stopped me. No one thanked me. It was as if I were a ghost that appeared only to drop off the food and disappear again. In the kitchen, I finally sat in one of the chairs. My legs could no longer hold me for another second. I closed my eyes and let the tears finally roll down my cheeks. Silent tears. Tears of exhaustion. Tears of humiliation. Tears of a woman who no longer recognized her own life. How had I allowed this to happen? But deep down, I knew the answer. It had happened little by little, so slowly that I didn't notice until it was too late. A favor here, a request there, a criticism disguised as a suggestion, a hurtful comment wrapped in concern. And I, always me, accepting, enduring, swallowing the words, believing that this was how it should be. Because she was my daughter. Because it was family. Because mothers always sacrifice everything. But that night, as I listened to the laughter from the dining room, the laughter of people eating the food I prepared in the house I built, something inside me began to break. A small crack, almost imperceptible. But it was there. And although I didn't know it yet, that crack was going to turn into an earthquake that would change everything. The next morning arrived too soon. I opened my eyes when the sun was barely beginning to filter through the window of my room, that small room at the back of the house that used to be my sewing studio and was now my refuge. Kate and Richard occupied the master bedroom, the one James and I shared for 30 years of marriage. They needed more space, they said. They had to work from home sometimes and required a quiet place. I understood, of course. I always understood. I got up with an aching body. Every muscle protested the 16 hours of the previous day. My knees cracked as I stood up. My hands still had red marks from washing so many dishes with hot water. But there was no time for complaints. The kids would wake up soon and need breakfast. Kate had an important meeting at 9. Richard was traveling at noon. The house didn't clean itself. I walked barefoot toward the kitchen, passing through the living room where traces of last night's party still remained. Dirty glasses on the tables, crumpled napkins on the sofa, crumbs everywhere. No one had picked up a single plate before going to sleep. Of course not. That's what I was there for. I made coffee and started to clean up. My movements were automatic, mechanical, the result of 3 years doing exactly the same thing every morning. Pick up, clean, organize, erase any evidence that other people live here. Make everything look perfect for when they wake up. I heard footsteps upstairs. The shower water began to run. Kate was already awake. In 20 minutes, she would come down expecting to find her breakfast ready, her coffee exactly how she liked it, the newspaper folded next to her plate. And if something was missing, if something wasn't in its precise place, she would have that comment ready. "Mom, what did you do all morning?" It's not that hard to have things ready. I beat eggs. I heated the skillet. I took the ham out of the refrigerator. Toast. Freshly squeezed orange juice. Cut fruit. Everything presented perfectly when Kate entered the kitchen 20 minutes later. Impeccable in her $2,000 gray suit, her perfect hair, her makeup without a single flaw. She didn't look at me. She took her coffee, checked her phone, bit into the toast while her fingers flew over the screen answering emails. I was part of the landscape, as relevant as the coffee maker or the toaster. "Mom, the kids have swim practice at 4. Don't forget to take them. And Emma needs you to buy the material for her science project. Here is the list." She left a paper on the table without even turning to see me. She kept eating, kept checking her phone. Not a good morning. Not a thank you. Not even an acknowledgement that I existed beyond being useful. "And dinner tonight?" "Kate, I need to go to the doctor. I have been trying to get that appointment for my knees for 3 months. She sighed, that long, exaggerated sigh she reserved for when I dared to have needs of my own. "Mom, it's Tuesday. You know that on Tuesdays Richard invites his partners to dinner. It is important for his career. You can't cancel now. The doctor can wait. Your knees have been like that for years. 1 more week won't make a difference, but it has been 3 months since. Mom, please. I don't have time for this now. I have a crucial meeting in an hour. Can you just once think about someone else other than yourself?" Her words hit me like stones. Think about someone else other than myself. I, who had spent 3 years thinking only of them. I, who had canceled that same medical appointment 4 times because there was always something more important. There was always a meeting of Kate's. There was always a trip of Richard's. There was always something that required me to be available, present, ready to serve. "It's fine," I whispered. "I will call the doctor to reschedule." Kate got up, took her briefcase, cast one last look at her phone. On the way out, she stopped at the door. "Oh, and Mom. About last night. Don't take it personally. It's just that you need to understand that when we have guests, image is important. We can't give the impression of disorganization. Think before you act, okay?" She left before I could respond. I heard her car engine starting, driving away, and I stayed there, standing in my own kitchen, holding the paper with the shopping list for my granddaughter's project, feeling like something inside me was compressing more and more. Emma and Liam came down half an hour later. They at least smiled at me. They hugged me. "Grandma, did you make pancakes?" Their innocent voices were the only thing that still made me feel like I was worth something in this house. I served them, combed their hair, got them ready for school. I took them in my old car that Kate always criticized. "That car is an embarrassment, Mom. What are the other parents going to think when they see you arrive?" But she never offered to lend me hers. After dropping off the kids, I went to the supermarket. I bought everything necessary for dinner tonight. 8 people, Richard and his partners. It had to be perfect. Prime quality meat, expensive wine, desserts from the fancy French bakery that charged $30 for a small tart. I paid with my own Social Security. The $450 I received each month for the years I worked cleaning offices. Kate never left money for food. She assumed I would cover it. After all, I lived in her house. The least I could do was contribute. In the checkout line, I saw Betty, my neighbor of a lifetime. 71 years old, a widow like me, but with a light in her eyes that I felt I had lost long ago. "Margaret, honey, you look exhausted. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Betty. Just a little tired." She looked at me with those eyes that saw too much. "That little tired of yours has been going on for 3 years. When are you going to tell me the truth?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Betty took my hand. Her warm fingers squeezed mine with tenderness. "I know what is happening in that house, Margaret. The whole neighborhood knows. The yelling, the way they treat you. Last night I heard when your daughter yelled at you in front of all those guests. The windows were open. I felt my face burn with shame. It was my daughter. It's complicated. No, it is not complicated. It is abuse. And you know it." Her words hung between us. Abuse. That word I had avoided for 3 years. That word I refused to apply to my own situation because mothers are not abused by their children. Mothers are loved. Mothers are respected. Mothers receive gratitude for everything they did. Right? "Betty, please, I don't want to talk about this here." "Then come to my house this afternoon. Have a coffee with me. Talk to me. You can't go on like this, Margaret. You are fading away. Every day I see you a little smaller, a little dimmer. That is not the woman I have known for 40 years. I have to prepare a dinner for 8 people tonight. And the kids. The kids have parents. Parents who should be taking care of them instead of turning you into their employee. Margaret, please, just think about it." I nodded without committing to anything. I paid for my groceries and left before Betty could keep pressing. Because if she kept talking, if I kept listening to that genuine concern in her voice, I might start crying right there in the middle of the supermarket. And I couldn't afford that luxury. I didn't have time for tears. I had a dinner to prepare. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen. Emma arrived from school, and I helped her with her homework. Liam needed reading practice. I took them to swim practice at 4. I waited an hour in the parking lot because Kate never wanted to pay for the club's shuttle service. "What for, if you can take them, Mom? You don't do anything else in the afternoons anyway." At 6 in the evening, the table was set. The meat in the oven. The sides ready. The wine open to breathe. I had gone up to change, to put on something presentable because Richard always asked for it. I don't want my partners to think we are sloppy with appearances. "Margaret, put on something decent." The partners arrived at 7. Richard welcomed them like the perfect host. Kate appeared minutes later, radiant, playing her role of successful wife in the perfect house. They introduced everyone except me. I was simply the lady serving the food, the one filling the glasses, the one clearing the plates. Invisible. One of the partners, a man of about 50 in a dark blue suit, looked at me when I poured him more wine. "And who are you?" "My mother." Kate interrupted before I could answer. "She lives with us. You know how it is. At a certain age, they need company. Company. As if I were a burden. As if they were doing me a favor by allowing me to live in my own house." "Ah, how generous you are," the partner responded. "Not everyone has the patience to take care of their elderly parents." Patience. Take care. Elderly. Every word was a slap disguised as a compliment. But Kate smiled, accepted the praise, nodded with fake modesty. "It's what families do, right? Take care of each other." I retreated to the kitchen. My hands shook as I washed the first dishes. I heard laughter from the dining room, conversations about business, investments, properties. Richard's voice dominated, bragging about his latest project. "We are about to close a major deal. A property with a lot of potential. Just a few legal details missing, but soon it will be ours." Ours, that word again, the same tone from the night before. And again that chill ran down my spine. I finished washing the dishes while they had dessert in the living room. No one came to see if I needed help. No one asked if I had eaten. In fact, I hadn't. There was no time. And now there was nothing left. The 8 guests had finished all the food I prepared. At 11 at night, the partners finally left. Richard closed the door with satisfaction. Kate took off her shoes, pleased with how the evening had turned out. I began to collect the dirty glasses from the living room. "Leave it for tomorrow, Mom. It's already late. But if I leave it, tomorrow they will complain about the mess." So I kept cleaning. They went up the stairs toward the master bedroom, the one that was mine. I heard them laugh about something. I heard the door close, and I continued cleaning in silence, in my own living room, like a ghost employee in a house that no longer felt mine. When I finally finished and went up to my small back room, it was 12:30 in the morning. My body begged for rest, but my mind wouldn't stop. Betty's words bounced around in my head. Abuse. Fading away. Employee. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. This room was barely bigger than a closet. My clothes hung on a rack because there was no space for a wardrobe. My books were stacked in boxes because there were no shelves. All my things, my whole life, compressed into this tiny space, while Kate and Richard expanded through the rest of my house as if it were their natural right. How did I allow this to happen? But I knew how. It had happened with promises, just a few months. "Mom, after we get settled, we will give you back your room." It had happened with guilt trips. "Don't you want to help your only daughter? After all, we are going to inherit everything from you someday." It had happened with normalization. Every request a little bigger than the last. Every boundary crossed justified as a temporary necessity. And now, I had been living as a squatter in my own house for 3 years. I lay down without changing my clothes. Too tired to move. I closed my eyes and let the tears roll silently down my cheeks, soaking the pillow. But somewhere deep inside me, in that place that still remembered who Margaret Sullivan was before becoming this, something began to wake up. Something that very soon could no longer remain asleep. There was a photograph hidden in the drawer of my nightstand. A yellowed photograph, worn at the edges from having touched it so many times over the years. In it appeared me at 28 years old, with James by my side and Kate in my arms. A baby of barely 6 months, looking at me with those huge eyes full of absolute trust. I was smiling in that photo. A genuine smile, one of those that comes from the soul. I looked strong. I looked happy. I looked complete. That morning, after another sleepless night, I took out the photograph and observed it for a long time, trying to remember that woman, trying to understand at what moment she got lost. James died when Kate was 12. A sudden heart attack took him in a matter of minutes. There was no time for goodbyes. There was no time to prepare ourselves. One day he was there, laughing at the breakfast table, And the next day I was standing in front of his casket trying to explain to our daughter why Dad wouldn't come back home. We were left alone. A 40-year-old widow with a 12-year-old girl and a mountain of debt that James had left without me knowing. Building this house had cost us more than planned. He had taken out loans. He had signed papers. He had bet everything that his small carpentry business would grow enough to pay for everything. It didn't grow. And I was left with the bills, with creditors knocking at the door, with a mortgage that threatened to take away the only roof we had. But I didn't let that happen. I worked at whatever I could. I cleaned offices at night. I washed other people's clothes. I babysat for other families while mine waited at home. 2 jobs. Sometimes 3. Sleeping 4 hours a night for years. But the house stayed in my name, completely paid off. And Kate was able to stay in the same school, with her same friends, without her life falling apart more than it already had. I sold my gold earrings, the ones James gave me on our anniversary. I sold my engagement ring, that ring that had belonged to his grandmother and meant so much to us. I sold the pearl necklace I inherited from my mother. Every piece of jewelry that had value turned into tuition, uniforms, books. When Kate turned 18 and announced she wanted to study law, I knew we didn't have money. My salary barely covered the basics. But I looked at my daughter, saw that determination in her eyes, that dream of becoming a lawyer, and I couldn't say no. I took a 3rd job on the weekends. I sold James's car that I had kept all those years. I took out a loan using the house as collateral, that house that had cost me so much to save. And I paid for every semester of her university, every book, every material, everything. Kate was brilliant. She graduated with honors. She got a job at one of the best firms in the city. She began to earn in a month what I earned in 6 months of work. And I was so proud, so happy to see that all those sacrifices had been worth it. She met Richard at the firm. They got married 2 years later in a ceremony that cost $20,000 and that I helped pay for, although Kate never mentioned it in front of her friends. To them, she had paid for everything herself. I was just the mother sitting in the front row in a borrowed dress because I didn't have money to buy a new one. The first years of her marriage were good. Kate visited me every week. She called me to tell me about her work. She included me in her plans. She still told me she loved me when she hung up the phone. But something changed when the kids were born. Or maybe it didn't change then. Maybe it just became more obvious. Kate began to see me differently. I was no longer her mother. I was a resource, a useful tool, someone available to watch the kids when nannies were expensive, someone who could cook when she was tired, someone who should be grateful to be included in her grandchildren's lives. And when they arrived at my door, asking to stay just a few months, I saw an opportunity to get my daughter back, to be close to my grandkids, to have a family under the same roof again. I didn't see the trap until I was already inside. The months turned into years, and somewhere along the way, Kate stopped asking. She started demanding. She stopped thanking. She started criticizing. She stopped seeing me as her mother. She started seeing me as a nuisance who was lucky to live in her house, because that was what she said now. Her house. Our house. When she talked to her friends, when she showed photos on social media, it was always our beautiful house. She never mentioned it was mine, that I had paid for it with blood and tears for years after James died. I put the photograph back in the drawer. My hands were shaking, not from old age, from rage. From a rage I had been burying for 3 years, and that was now beginning to push its way to the surface like boiling lava. I got up and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was 69 years old, deep wrinkles, gray hair, tired eyes. But for the first time, in a long time, I saw something else. I saw a glimmer of that Margaret from the photograph, that Margaret who survived her husband's death, who paid for a house alone, who raised a daughter without help, who never gave up no matter how many times life knocked her down. That Margaret was still there. She had just been asleep, but she was starting to wake up. The discovery came 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, when the sun came in slanted through the windows of the study that Kate and Richard had turned into their home office. I was cleaning, as always, running the duster over the shelves, picking up forgotten coffee mugs, organizing the papers scattered on the desk. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't snooping. I was simply doing what was expected of me, cleaning the spaces they dirtied. But then I saw the folder. It was half open on Richard's desk, with documents peeking out the sides. Normally I wouldn't have paid attention. Normally I would have kept cleaning without looking. But something caught my eye. A small detail, but impossible to ignore. My name, Margaret Sullivan, was written at the top of the first document, in big letters. Official. I put down the duster. My hands moved on their own, taking the folder, opening it completely. My eyes scanned the first paper, then the second, then the third. Every word I read was like a direct punch to the stomach. Deed of property transfer. Suggested psychological evaluation to determine mental competency. Petition for legal guardianship due to incapacity. Proposal for assisted living residence for seniors with cognitive decline. The words danced in front of my eyes. I couldn't be seeing this. It couldn't be real. But there it was, black on white. A complete plan, detailed, meticulously prepared. A plan to declare me incompetent. To take my house. To lock me in a nursing home. My legs stopped supporting me. I let myself fall into the desk chair, still holding the documents with hands shaking so much I could barely read. But I kept reading. I needed to see everything. I needed to understand the magnitude of what they were planning. There were quotes from 3 different facilities. The cheapest cost $2,500 a month. The most expensive, $4,000. All described their excellent facilities for patients with senile dementia. There were financial appraisals detailing the value of my house. $320,000, according to the most recent estimate. There were drafts of legal documents, transferring ownership to the name of Catherine Sullivan Miller. And there was something else. Something that made the air leave my lungs completely. Printed messages. WhatsApp conversations between Kate and Richard. I already spoke with Dr. Mendez. He says with the symptoms I described, he can do an evaluation suggesting cognitive decline. Are you sure it will work? Trust me. I have handled cases like this before. Once we have the medical statement, the rest is simple legal paperwork. And if she resists, she won't. She is too exhausted, too confused. She won't even understand what she is signing until it is too late. You are brilliant. Love. In 6 months, this house will officially be ours. I know. And she will be in a place where they take care of her properly. It fits everyone best. You feel bad for her. Why should I? We are doing her a favor. At her age, living alone is dangerous. And we need the space. The kids are growing. They deserve bigger rooms. This house should have always been ours anyway. I dropped the papers. Tears began to roll down my cheeks without me being able to stop them. They weren't tears of sadness. They were of something much deeper, of betrayal, of absolute horror, of a wound that cut to the bone. My own daughter, my only daughter, the girl I carried in my womb, the girl I nursed, the girl I sang to every night until she fell asleep, the girl for whom I sold every valuable object I had, the girl for whom I worked until my hands bled. That girl was planning to steal my house and lock me up as if I were trash that needed to be discarded. I don't know how long I sat there, looking at those documents, reading and rereading those conversations, trying to process something my brain refused to accept. I could hear noises in other parts of the house. Emma and Liam playing in their rooms. The hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Life continued normally while my world fell apart. Finally, I forced myself to move. I took out my cell phone, that old phone Kate always criticized. I took photographs of every document, of every page, of every message. My hands kept shaking, but I managed to capture everything. I didn't know what for. I didn't know what I was going to do with these proofs. I just knew I needed to have them. I put everything back exactly as I had found it, every paper in its place. The folder half open just as it was before. If they discovered I knew, they would speed up their plans. And I needed time. Time to think. Time to understand. Time to decide what to do. I left the study with trembling legs. I walked toward the kitchen. I needed water. I needed air. I needed something to anchor me to reality because I felt I was floating in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. I filled a glass with water. I drank it in one gulp. I filled another. My reflection in the window above the sink showed me a pale woman, with red eyes, with an expression of shock I couldn't hide. I heard the garage door open, Kate's car entering. She was arriving early today. She had an important video call from home. She had said so this morning. I took a deep breath. I wiped my tears. I forced myself to compose my face. When Kate entered the kitchen 2 minutes later, I was peeling potatoes for dinner with mechanical movements, my gaze fixed on the cutting board. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay over here?" Her voice sounded so normal, so casual, as if she hadn't been planning to destroy my life, as if she hadn't spent weeks designing the way to steal everything I had. "Everything's fine," I replied without looking up. My voice sounded strangely calm even to me. "Good. I'm going to be in the study on a video call. Don't interrupt me for anything. It is very important." "Sure." She left. I heard her go up the stairs. I heard the study door close. And there I stayed, standing in my kitchen, in my house, the house they were planning to steal from me, holding a potato peeler, staring at the wall. For the first time in 3 years, something inside me didn't cry. It didn't shrink. It didn't make itself small. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness of my small room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house that no longer felt like mine. Every creak of wood, every sigh of the wind against the windows. Every breath I took seemed heavier than the last. The photographs on my phone burned like embers. I had reviewed them 20 times. 30. Every word of those messages was etched in my memory like red-hot iron. She is too exhausted, too confused. This house should have always been ours anyway. When dawn began to filter through the threadbare curtain, I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to stay quiet. I wasn't going to let this happen, but I wasn't going to act on impulse either. Kate was a lawyer. Richard too. They knew every legal trick, every loophole, every way to manipulate the system in their favor. If I was going to fight, I needed to be prepared. At 7 in the morning, when Kate and Richard were still sleeping, I got dressed and left the house without making a sound. I walked the 3 blocks to Betty's house. She opened her door just past 6 every morning to water her plants, to get the newspaper, to enjoy the silence before the neighborhood woke up. She saw me arrive and knew immediately that something had changed. My face must have reflected the storm raging inside me. "Margaret, come in. Sit down." I didn't sit. I stayed standing in her living room, trembling, and finally let it all out. I told her about the documents, about the messages, about the plan to declare me incompetent and steal my house, about the 3 years of abuse I had endured, believing it was my duty as a mother. The words came out like an overflowing river. Everything I had kept inside for so long finally found an escape. And when I finished, when there were no more words left, Betty hugged me while I cried like I hadn't cried in years. That crying wasn't of defeat. It was of rage, of indignation, of a woman who had finally seen the full truth and refused to continue being a victim. "Enough, Margaret," Betty said when my tears finally calmed. "Enough allowing them to trample on you. You have rights, you have dignity, and you are going to fight for them. I don't know how. They are lawyers. I am just. Just what? A woman who paid for that house with her own sweat? A mother who sacrificed everything for a daughter who turned out to be a viper? Margaret, listen to me well. I know someone who can help you. Her name is Sarah Jenkins. She is a lawyer specializing in elder rights. She has handled cases like yours. Cases of family abuse, asset fraud, psychological violence against seniors. Do you think she? I know she will help you. Give me your phone." Betty took my cell phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. She spoke with someone for 5 minutes. She explained the situation in clear and direct terms. When she hung up, she looked at me with determination. "Sarah can see you tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Her office is downtown. I will go with you, but Kate is going to ask where I am. She always asks. She always needs something. Then lie. Tell her you have a doctor's appointment. Tell her you are going to buy something. Margaret, you have to start building your own life outside that prison. And start now. Do it for you. For the first time in 3 years, I was going to do something without asking for permission. I was going to go somewhere without explaining every detail. I was going to take control of my own existence. I returned home before Kate woke up. I made breakfast as usual. I served the coffee as usual. I acted as usual. But something had changed. I had changed. And although they didn't know it yet, the ground beneath their feet had just become unstable. The next day, I told Kate I had a doctor's appointment for my knees. She barely looked up from her phone. Fine, but be back before 2. I have a virtual meeting, and the kids need lunch. Sure. Betty picked me up at 9:30. She drove in silence while I looked out the window, trying to calm the nerves that threatened to paralyze me. What was I doing? Was I really going to confront my own daughter? Was I really going to legally accuse her of trying to rob me? Yes, because it wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my dignity, about my right to live the years I had left with respect and peace, about not allowing them to lock me up like useless trash. Sarah Jenkins' office was in a modest but professional building. She received us personally, a woman of about 38 years, with intelligent eyes and a presence that inspired immediate confidence. Mrs. Sullivan, sit down, please. Tell me everything. And I did. I showed her the photographs of the documents. I showed her the messages. I told her about the 3 years of systematic abuse, about the humiliations, about the work without rest, about how they had turned me into an employee inside my own home. Sarah listened to everything without interrupting. She took notes. She reviewed every photograph with professional attention. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked me directly in the eyes. Mrs. Sullivan, what your daughter and your son-in-law are planning to do is a crime. It is called aggravated asset fraud. And what they have been doing to you during these 3 years is psychological violence and economic abuse against an elderly person. Both are federal crimes with serious consequences. Can I stop them? Not only can you are going to stop them, and you are going to recover total control of your life and your property. But I need you to trust me and follow every step I indicate. Can you do that? I looked at Betty. She nodded with an encouraging smile. Then I looked at Sarah, this young woman who didn't know me but was willing to fight for my rights. Can I? Perfect. Then let's start. Sarah took out a notebook and began to write. An action plan, step by step, methodical, legal, irrefutable. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I had completely forgotten. Hope. The next 10 days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, everything remained the same. I prepared breakfasts. I cleaned rooms. I took care of the kids. I endured the derogatory comments from Kate and the looks of superiority from Richard. But on the inside, something had changed radically. I had changed. Sarah had given me precise instructions. First, I needed to document everything. Every abuse. Every humiliation. Every time they treated me like an employee. So I began to record conversations with my phone hidden in my apron pocket. I began to take photographs of the endless list of tasks Kate left me every morning. I began to keep the receipts of everything I paid for with my own pension to keep the house running. Second, Sarah had initiated the legal proceedings to shield my property. We went to the public registry. We updated the deed. We put legal locks that prevented any transfer without my physical presence and the verification of an independent notary. Kate and Richard could have all the fake documents they wanted, but without my real verified signature, it was worth nothing. Third, Sarah contacted the special prosecutor for crimes against the elderly. She gave them copies of everything. The messages, the fraudulent documents, the recordings of the abuse. They opened a preliminary investigation. Discreet, silent, but official. And fourth, the step that cost me the most but that Sarah insisted was necessary, I contacted my extended family, James's brothers, whom I hadn't seen since the funeral, my own cousins whom Kate had systematically alienated from my life with excuses and constant cancellations. I told them everything. I showed them the proof. And to my surprise, each one responded with indignation and support. Aunt Margaret, why didn't you tell us anything before? Asked Uncle Bob, James's younger brother, with tears in his eyes when we met at a cafe far from my neighborhood. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought it was my fault. Because she is my daughter, and mothers are supposed to endure everything. No, Auntie, no one has to endure abuse. Not even from their own blood. Especially not from their own blood. Uncle Bob hugged me. He promised me he would be present when the time came to confront Kate, his other brothers too, my cousins Mike and Linda too. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. I had a silent army preparing in the shadows. The day of the confrontation arrived 2 weeks after the discovery. It was a Sunday. Sarah had chosen that day specifically because Kate always organized family lunches on Sundays to maintain the appearance of a perfect family. But this Sunday would be different. I had told Kate I had invited some relatives. She rolled her eyes, but accepted. The more people see how well we live, the better. She had said with that fake smile that no longer fooled me. She had no idea who would actually come nor why. At 12 noon they began to arrive. Uncle Bob with his 2 brothers. My cousins Mike and Linda. James's sister, who lived in another state but had flown in especially for this. And Betty, of course. My rock. My witness to everything. Kate received them with poorly concealed surprise. Mom, I didn't know you had invited so many people. I don't have enough food prepared. Don't worry, honey. They didn't come to eat. The tone of my voice made everyone in the room go still. It was a tone Kate had never heard from me. Firm, clear, without trembling, without apologies. Richard came down the stairs at that moment. He stopped upon seeing the number of people in the living room. What is going on here? Sit down, I said. Both of you. Now. Something in my expression must have scared them because they obeyed. Kate and Richard sat on the sofa, their faces reflecting confusion mixed with a first hint of worry. I took out my phone. I opened the photo folder, and I began to speak. 2 weeks ago I found something interesting while cleaning the study. Documents. Messages. A complete plan to declare me mentally incompetent, steal my house, and lock me in a nursing home. The color left Kate's face. Richard went rigid. Mom, I can explain. No. You shut up and listen. For 3 years you turned me into your maid. You humiliated me. You exploited me. You treated me like trash in my own house. And now I discover that it was all part of a plan to steal the only thing I have. My voice didn't shake. The tears I had shed for weeks no longer existed. Only ice remained. Pure, hard ice. I passed the phone to Uncle Bob. He projected the images onto the living room television. The documents, the messages, everything. Every word Kate and Richard had written was exposed in front of the whole family. Kate tried to get up. This is private. You have no right. Sit down, ordered Uncle Bob with a voice that admitted no reply. You lost all your rights when you decided to betray your mother. For 20 minutes, the family read everything. I watched their expressions go from shock to disgust to absolute fury. Linda, my cousin, who had always been sweet and patient, looked at Kate as if she were looking at a monster. How could you? She asked with a broken voice. After everything she did for you, after she sold even her wedding ring to pay for your college, is this how you repay her? Kate tried to defend herself. You don't understand. Mom is aging. She needs professional care. I was just trying to. To steal her house, Mike interrupted her. To lock her up as if she were garbage. To keep everything she built. Don't try to paint it any other way. Richard finally spoke. Look, I think there is a misunderstanding. Those documents were just exploratory. We never had any real intention of. Liar, I said. The word came out of my mouth like a sentence, and I have proof of every word you just said. Everything is recorded, everything is documented, and everything is in the hands of the proper authorities. The silence that followed was absolute. Kate looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger, and she was right. The submissive woman she had trampled on for 3 years no longer existed. This is my house, I continued. It has always been my house, and you two have exactly 1 week to find another place to live. If you haven't left by then, I will remove you with the help of the authorities. You can't do this, whispered Kate. I am your daughter, and I am your mother. The mother who sacrificed everything for you. The mother who worked 3 jobs so you could study. The mother who gave you everything she had. And you paid me with betrayal. I stood up. The whole room looked at me. But I only had eyes for Kate. You have 1 week. And if you ever try to come near this property after that, if you try anything legal against me, every single one of these proofs will become public. Your professional reputation will be destroyed. Your bar association membership will be revoked. Did you understand me? Kate didn't answer. She just looked at the floor, her face a mask of humiliation and contained rage. Richard tried one last time. Margaret, let's be reasonable. We can reach an agreement. The agreement is that you leave my house. There is no negotiation. The family began to leave. One by one they hugged me. They told me they were proud, that I had done the right thing, that I could count on them for whatever I needed. Betty was the last to leave. She squeezed my hand. You did it, Margaret. You got your life back. When the door closed, Kate and Richard remained sitting on the sofa, defeated, exposed, destroyed, and I felt freer than I had felt in years. The following days were tense like a rope about to break. Kate and Richard locked themselves in the master bedroom for hours after everyone left. I heard them arguing. Their voices came through the walls, although I couldn't distinguish the exact words. But the tone was unmistakable. Panic, rage, desperation. I stood firm. I slept that night like I hadn't slept in years. Deeply, without nightmares, without that constant knot in my stomach. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like the owner of my own house. The next day, Kate tried the first move. She came down to the kitchen where I was making coffee, her eyes swollen from crying so much. She looked small, vulnerable, like the girl who used to run to my arms when she was afraid. "Mom," she whispered, "we have to talk. There is nothing to talk about. You have 6 days. Please, let me explain. Everything got out of control. I never wanted to hurt you. I was worried about your well-being." I looked her directly in the eyes. Worried about my well-being? Or worried about keeping my house? "Mom, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I made terrible mistakes. But I am your daughter. Your only daughter. You can't simply discard me." I watched the tears roll down her cheeks. 3 years ago, those tears would have destroyed me. They would have made me cave. They would have convinced me that I was the cruel one, the bad one, the one breaking the family. But now I saw those tears for what they were. Manipulation. A last, desperate attempt to regain control. Kate, for 3 years you treated me worse than an employee. You humiliated me. You exploited me. You planned to steal everything I have and lock me up as if I were trash. And now that there are consequences, you come with tears. No, it doesn't work anymore. But the kids, think about Emma and Liam. They love you. You are going to separate them from their grandmother. That was her lowest move, using my grandkids as a shield. My hands shook holding the coffee cup, but I kept my voice firm. The kids will be able to visit me whenever they want, but you and Richard will not live under this roof anymore. That decision will not change. Kate straightened up. The pain on her face transformed into something darker, into barely contained fury. "Fine. If that's how you want things, but you will regret it. You are going to end up alone, bitter, without family, and when you really need help, no one will be there. I prefer to be alone than abused." She left the kitchen with furious steps. 10 minutes later, I heard her car starting, the tires screeching against the pavement. She had gone, leaving the kids asleep upstairs. She hadn't even made their breakfast, because I was always there to do it. But this time, when Emma and Liam came down looking for their mother, I had to explain to them that Mom had gone out. I made them pancakes. I took them to school. I did everything I always did, because they were innocent in this disaster. During the following days, Kate tried different tactics. First was the emotional attack. Then came the guilt. She accused me of being selfish, of breaking the family, of not understanding how hard her professional life was. When that didn't work, she tried blackmail. She threatened to never let me see the grandkids again. She threatened to spread rumors that I was senile and dangerous. Every threat I recorded, Every text message I saved. Sarah had warned me this would happen. Manipulative people always escalate when they lose control. Richard took a different approach. He tried to negotiate. He offered me money to let them stay 6 months longer. Then 3 months, then 1. I rejected every offer. It wasn't about time. It was about my house being mine again. On the 5th day, Kate appeared with a lawyer, a man in a gray suit who clearly owed her favors. They tried to intimidate me with legal language, with threats of lawsuits for illegal eviction, for breach of verbal agreements of family housing. I took out my phone and called Sarah. She arrived in 40 minutes with all the documentation we needed. Kate's lawyer reviewed the papers, and his expression changed gradually from confidence to discomfort. When he read about the ongoing fiscal investigation, when he saw the legal locks on the property, when he understood that every threat was being documented to add additional charges, he apologized and left. Kate didn't try again with lawyers. On the 6th day, I found Richard packing in the master bedroom. He worked in silence, folding clothes, putting objects in boxes. He didn't look at me when I entered. "Where are you going?" I asked. Not out of genuine curiosity, but because I needed to know for the kids. "We rented an apartment, small, 2 bedrooms. It is what we can afford for now." I nodded. Richard stopped, looking at a framed photograph of his wedding with Kate. He left it face down on the dresser. "You won, Margaret. I hope you are happy. It is not about winning or losing. It is about dignity." "Dignity," he repeated bitterly. "You destroyed the relationship with your only daughter for dignity. My daughter destroyed that relationship when she decided to treat me like garbage. I only defended myself." He said nothing more. He kept packing. I left the room. That would soon be mine again. On the night of the 6th day, Kate looked for me one last time. It was late. The kids were sleeping. Richard was finishing, packing the car with the first boxes. She entered the kitchen where I was drinking tea and sat across from me. There were no tears this time. No manipulation. Only exhaustion. "I am not going to ask for your forgiveness," she said with a flat voice, "because I know you wouldn't accept it, and you are probably right not to." I remained silent, waiting. "But I need you to understand something. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always this person who hurt you. Somewhere along the way, I got lost. The work, the pressure, the money, keeping up appearances. Everything became more important than people. More important than you. That justifies nothing. I know. But I want you to know that the girl who raised me, that girl who loved you with all her heart, still exists somewhere. Only she got buried under years of ambition and selfishness." I looked at her. I searched her eyes for some trace of genuine sincerity. I found something. Small, barely visible, but it was there. A glimmer of the daughter I once had. "Maybe someday you can find that girl again," I said softly. "But it won't be here. It won't be at my expense. You need to leave and rebuild yourself far from me." "I know." She stood up. She walked toward the door. She stopped without turning. "The kids are going to miss you. And I them. But they can visit me whenever they want. The door will always be open for Emma and Liam. Only for them. I understand." She left. I heard her go up the stairs one last time. I heard muffled voices, footsteps, the sound of more boxes being loaded. And on the morning of the 7th day, when I woke up, the house was silent. A different silence, a silence of peace. They were gone. The first weeks after they left were strange. The house felt too big and too quiet at the same time. I woke up early out of habit, ready to prepare breakfasts that no one was going to eat. I found myself cleaning rooms that were already clean. My hands sought tasks that no longer existed. But slowly, very slowly, I began to rediscover what it meant to live in my own house. I reclaimed the master bedroom, the one James and I shared for 30 years of marriage. The one they had taken from me as if it meant nothing. I spent 2 days cleaning every corner, removing every trace of Kate and Richard. I changed the sheets. I moved the furniture back to how it was before. I hung on the wall the photograph of my wedding that had been stored in a box for 3 years. The first night I slept there, I cried. But not from sadness, from relief, from liberation. from feeling like the owner of my own space again. Sarah continued handling the legal aspects. The fiscal investigation was advancing. Although Kate and Richard had left, the consequences of their actions followed them. The Bar Association had opened an ethical investigation against both for attempted fraud against a vulnerable relative. Their professional reputations were under public scrutiny. I felt no satisfaction with that. I just felt that justice was working as it should. Betty came to visit me almost every day. We drank coffee in the living room. That living room I could now enjoy without feeling like I was invading someone else's space. She helped me paint the walls. We chose light, cheerful colors that filled the spaces with light. Soft yellow in the kitchen, warm beige in the living room, pale lavender in my bedroom. "You are being reborn," Betty told me one afternoon while we painted together, recovering the life they stole from you. She was right. Every painted wall was an act of recovery. Every relocated piece of furniture was a declaration of independence. Every decision I made, without having to ask for permission or justify myself, was a step toward the Margaret I had been before becoming a shadow. Uncle Bob and his brothers came on weekends. They helped me fix things that had been broken for years. The back door handle, the kitchen faucet that dripped, the garden I had neglected due to lack of time and energy. We worked together, talked, laughed. I recovered a family that Kate had systematically kept away. 1 month after they left, I received a call from Emma. "Grandma, I miss you. Can I come visit you?" My heart compressed. "Of course, my love. Whenever you want. Mom says you don't want to see us?" "That is not true, Emma. I always want to see you and Liam. You can come whenever you want. Always." There was silence on the other end. Then I heard Kate's voice in the background, saying something I couldn't distinguish. Emma whispered quickly, "I have to hang up, Grandma. I love you." The call cut off. I stood holding the phone, feeling sadness tighten my chest. Kate was using the kids, manipulating them, putting them in the middle of something they didn't have to carry. I called Sarah. She assured me we had legal visitation rights as a grandmother if Kate tried to block contact completely. "Let's wait to see what happens," she advised me. Sometimes things resolve themselves when people have time to process. 2 weeks later, Kate appeared at my door. She hadn't called. She simply rang the bell on a Saturday afternoon. When I opened it, I found Emma and Liam standing next to her with their small backpacks. "I need you to watch them today," said Kate without looking me in the eye. "Richard and I have commitments we can't cancel. And is this a favor you are asking me or an order?" Something crossed her face. Something like shame. "It is a favor. Please." It was the first time in years I heard her use that word with me. "Please." "Okay. What time are you picking them up?" "At 6. The kids ran toward me with hugs. Kate remained standing on the threshold, uncomfortable, not knowing what to do or say. Finally, she just nodded and left. I spent the day with my grandkids. I made them cookies. We played in the garden that now looked beautiful thanks to Uncle Bob's work. I read them stories. I gave them all the love I had been holding back for a month. When Kate returned at 6, the kids didn't want to leave. "Grandma, can we stay over?" asked Liam. "That depends on your mom," I replied, looking at Kate. She hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll pick them up tomorrow after lunch." That night, while I tucked Emma and Liam into bed in the guest room, she asked me, "Grandma, why don't they live here anymore?" "Because sometimes people need their own space. But that doesn't mean we stop loving each other." "Is Mom mad at you?" "Mom and I are working things out. But that has nothing to do with you guys. I love you always, no matter what." Emma cuddled up against me. "I love you too, Grandma." The days began to turn into weeks. Kate started bringing the kids more frequently. She never stayed. She never entered beyond the door. But there was something different about her. Something softer, more broken. As if life outside my house was teaching her lessons I never could teach her. One day, 2 months after they left, Kate asked if we could talk. Nothing else. Just talk. We sat in the garden. She looked at the flowers Betty and I had planted. The silence between us wasn't comfortable anymore, but it wasn't hostile either. "The apartment is small," she said finally. "The kids share a room. Richard is working double because we lost several clients when the investigation came out. I am in therapy. I looked at her, surprised. Therapy? My therapist says I have toxic behavioral patterns inherited from years of prioritizing success over relationships. He says I turn people into tools to achieve my goals, including you. And what do you think of that? I think he is right. I think I became someone horrible and didn't realize it until I lost everything. You didn't lose everything, Kate. You lost control over me, but you never had to lose me. You chose to lose me when you decided to treat me like trash. I know, and I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I am trying to change. Really? I didn't respond immediately. I observed this woman who was my daughter but who had become a stranger, and I searched my heart for what I really felt. I don't forgive you yet, I said finally. Maybe I never will, completely. But I believe you when you say you are trying to change, and that is something. Is it enough? For now, yes. Kate nodded. She got up to leave. At the door, she turned one last time. Thank you for taking care of the kids, for not using this against me, for being a better person than I was to you. I don't do it for you. I do it for them. And for me? I know, she left. And I stayed in my garden, in my house, in my recovered life, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but peace. And for now, that was more than enough. 6 months passed like water through fingers. 6 months of rebuilding, of rediscovery, of learning again who Margaret Sullivan was when no one told her what to do, what to feel, how to live. The house had transformed completely. It was no longer that tense and cold space where I walked on tiptoes so as not to bother anyone. Now it was mine in every corner. The walls painted in colors I chose. The furniture arranged how I liked it. The garden blooming with plants Betty and I tended every morning. I began to do things I had forgotten I enjoyed. I signed up for a sewing workshop at the community center. I resumed reading, those books I always wanted to read but never had time. Betty convinced me to go with her to dance classes on Thursday afternoons. Dance for seniors, the poster said. I laughed, thinking that at my 69 years, I could still learn new steps. Sarah finally closed the legal case. Kate and Richard had accepted a plea deal, temporary suspension of their professional licenses, community service, considerable fines, but not jail. I didn't want that. I didn't want to destroy them. I only wanted to protect myself. The relationship with Kate remained complicated. We hadn't reconciled. We would probably never have what we had when she was a child. But we had found a fragile balance. She brought the kids twice a week. Sometimes she stayed a few minutes to drink coffee. We never talked about what happened. It was too soon, too painful still. But there were moments, small moments where I saw glimpses of the daughter I once knew. When she thanked me for watching the kids, when she asked how my health was without sounding like an obligation, when her eyes filled with something resembling genuine regret. I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive her completely. The damage was deep. The scars would remain there for years. But I was learning that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, and that rebuilding didn't mean going back to being what we were before. One afternoon in November, while walking through the downtown farmers market buying vegetables for dinner, I saw her. Kate was on the other side of the street, coming out of a building I recognized as the community service offices where she fulfilled her mandatory hours. She looked tired. Her clothes were no longer designer. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The wrinkles around her eyes seemed more pronounced. Our gazes crossed. For a moment neither moved. Then she raised her hand in a shy wave. I nodded. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away with hostility either. She went her way. I went mine. And I understood something important in that moment. She was paying her consequences. She was learning lessons life was teaching her in the hardest way possible. It wasn't my job to punish her more, nor was it my job to rescue her. My job was simply to live my own life with dignity. That night, while I ate dinner at my table, in my kitchen, surrounded by the peaceful silence of my home, I thought about the whole journey traveled. From that Christmas Eve when Kate yelled at me in front of 20 people to this moment of absolute peace. I had lost my daughter in many ways, But I had recovered myself, and that, I discovered, was much more valuable than I imagined. The phone rang. It was Emma. Grandma, tomorrow can we make cookies again? Of course, my love. Come after school. I love you. Grandma, I love you too, sweetheart. I hung up with a smile. The grandkids remained the bridge between Kate and me. And maybe that was enough for now. Maybe with time that bridge would strengthen. Or maybe not. But I no longer lived my life based on maybes. I got up and walked toward the window. The sunset painted the sky in oranges and pinks. Betty was watering her garden on the other side of the fence. She saw me and waved. "Tomorrow we go to the dance, right?" she yelled. "Of course," I replied, laughing. I looked around my living room. The photographs on the walls, the cushions I chose, the curtains I sewed myself in the workshop. Every object told the story of my recovery, of my rebirth. I was 69 years old. Many would say I was too old to start over, but I had learned something fundamental in these months. It is never too late to recover your dignity. It is never too late to set boundaries. It is never too late to say enough and rebuild your life on your own terms. You had been a mother. You had been a wife. You had been a victim. You had been invisible. But now you were simply Margaret Sullivan, a 69-year-old woman who had fought for her right to exist with respect, who had confronted her own daughter when necessary, who had said no when the world expected her to say yes. And that made me feel stronger than I had felt in decades. I closed the curtains and got ready to sleep. In my room, in my bed, in my house. Tomorrow would be another day, with its challenges, with its uncertainties, with the possibility that Kate would knock on the door asking for something or simply to see her children. But I was no longer afraid, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. True love does not demand constant sacrifice. True love does not ask you to turn into a shadow. True love respects, honors, values, and if someone couldn't give me that, then they didn't deserve my presence in their life. Not even if that someone carried my blood. I lay down and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I slept deeply, without nightmares, without knots in my stomach, without that constant weight of feeling that I was never enough, because finally I had understood the most liberating truth of all. I had always been enough. I just needed to believe it. And now I did. With every fiber of my being, I finally believed it.